And we would love to have our author here today and talk about introducing her. That's Johnna, and Johnna is our Director of Program and Services, and I'm happy to say my kind of direct supervisor. So I'm really excited to hear what she has to say. She directs our programming and services here through our organization, which we're supporting 1 million plus of caregivers across Alberta. She has over 20 years human services experience. She holds multiple certifications in about dementia care and is bringing us some useful information. When I talked to her about earlier today, she said it was a passion project. So I'm really excited to hear what she has to say. I do have the chat open and the Q&A, but I think if it's all right, we will leave the Q&A to the end and make sure there's time at the end and make sure your questions get answered. Anything else you'd like to add, Karen or Johnna, before I pass it over to you?
No, I think that's great. And
Okay.
Sandra, I'm going to leave it up to you to monitor the chat because let us know if there's anything in there, or if anybody needs any assistance or anything. So great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming. And this is exciting for me. I have actually had, and I don't know how many of you have actually seen, oh, okay, it has to be right in front of it, seen the book, Johnna's book, that, yes, we were saying, although she is our director of programs and services, she kind of keeps this other part of her life sometimes a little hidden from people. And being able to look through this book, and it literally is a pocket book. It's like a quick reference guide for somebody who is caring for somebody with dementia or trying to learn about it or anything like that. So yeah, I'm excited that we're finally doing this. So thank you, Johnna.
Absolutely.
Great. So you know what? Let's jump into the questions then. So
All right, let's do it.
Okay. So let's do the basic. What was your why? Like why did you originally write this book? And I know that this book was written in 2014, if I get that right.
Yeah.
Yes. And so obviously you've been doing this for a while. What was your why behind all of this?
Well, my why resulted from conversations with families. So if you look at the dedication in this book, it says, I dedicated it to those who fight this disease every single day and the families that have changed my life forever. I have learned so much from people living with this diagnosis over the years, and they became my friends. And as they became my friends, so did their families, became near and dear to my heart. And my background, how I got into that line of work, was working in continuing care and supportive living environments, in rec therapy roles and in program development roles. And so I did direct programming with people living with Alzheimer's and dementia. Families sometimes would join those programs, and I would observe interactions, and then families would come back to me often and say, "Oh my gosh, how did you accomplish that without it turning into an argument? Like I can't engage with my loved one without it being an issue. Like, so can we talk about that?" And so I found myself, having a lot of similar conversations over the years with family members. And that's just one example. I also had a lot of heart-to-heart conversations about, what it's like to experience the changing relationship with a loved one and the loss that they're going through. I part of the book talks about how, finding common ground on that loss, I think, is an important therapeutic outlet for the family member and for the person living with the disease. Because although we often talk about with Alzheimer's dementia how difficult it is on family, it's every bit as difficult on the person who's diagnosed. They get to watch pieces of themselves, disappear and know it, and then lose the ability to express their knowledge of it. So, I can get long-winded, so just cut me off at any time, and I'm sorry, but that my passion for writing and the concept for writing, it really stemmed from having similar conversations over and over again with family, and with staff members, because I did a lot of staff education in this space too. And so I thought, There's tons of great books out there. I've read them, and they're fabulous. And I just felt like something quick and easy and very relatable that, was something that I could do. So I did it.
Great. And I'm curious in here as well, like listening to you talking and so many questions come up as you're going, but I know for myself, maybe not only in the role that I have here at Caregivers Alberta, but I'm also a caregiver for somebody with dementia. And kind of having that progression after I started here and after I worked at Dementia Network, I kind of had these resources that were available to me that maybe aren't available to everybody who's out there. And that's where, yeah, first getting this book and looking at it. And thinking like what would you say, like if somebody was to pick this up? And again, it's for anybody who hasn't seen it, it's great. It is literally like a pocketbook. If I sat down to read it end to end, it would be 3 hours maybe. So yeah, it's very
Large font, make it easily readable. Yeah.
But what would you say? What would you say would be kind of the best area, the most impactful section for somebody to look at who, say, just has somebody who's first diagnosed with dementia?
Yeah, I think most impactful in the beginning, I think it's important to just understand that the brain is compromised, right, of your loved one. And that's difficult to remember when you see, if you're in early beginning stages of this, because you see so much that still seems very normal, right? But the brain is being compromised. And so I think those, understanding the diagnosis, is key. And that doesn't mean you have to understand all of it right away, but that key piece of recognizing the brain is experiencing changes and damage that there's no control over, right? So understanding those just foundational elements of what causes the disease or causes the symptoms of the disease, right? That causes the things that we see in reaction to this disease. And so there's a chapter in there that says, don't argue. And I think if that's the number one thing you can start pulling on board quickly, then that's huge, right? Because you will never win an argument with someone whose cognition is compromised, not of that their reality is different. You will never win an argument with someone living with dementia. It is not going to happen. You can rationalize all you want, you can bring the evidence forward, and it doesn't matter. And at the end of the day, why does it matter to argue? Because you're frustrating yourself and you're frustrating them as well, right? So if you learn that earlier in your journey, you're going to avoid more, conflict down the road, because arguments come up even more often as the disease progresses. So that's key, I think, for sure.
Yeah, and I know for me, and again, talking with some of our caregivers that come in too, and explaining to people that forgetting something and realizing you have forgotten something because somebody's saying, don't you remember this? Don't you? It's scary. So not only when people are reacting, it's because, okay, they don't remember it, but they're also scared because they don't remember it. They realize, okay, something is going on here that's outside of my control. And that's very scary. And so having those conversations and reminding them constantly can just heighten that as well. So yeah, definitely the don't argue is yes, a very good place to start. So, and actually that's interesting because that leads me into my next question, which is chapter 5 in here is around how to communicate effectively. And I think that is so core to, I mean, not only as a caregiver for somebody with a dementia, but everything in life really centers around that, but particularly when you have somebody who, yeah, parts of the brain aren't working the same. They may have other ways of communicating. So kind of tying in with some of the other chapters as well, looking at kind of the verbal, the nonverbal, all of those different things. So what would you say around kind of learning to use all of the senses when communicating with somebody?
Yeah, I think so often we think of communication as verbal communication. And when we stop and think about that, we recognize there's so much more to communication that's nonverbal, right? It's our reactions, it's our physical physical, facial expressions and things like that. So yes, I think when you're communicating with someone whose perception is altered, you have to recognize that they are taking in all of these inputs. They're taking in what you're saying, they're taking in what they're seeing, and what they're seeing and what you're saying may not be meshing in their brain, right? So it's not making sense. So then that's already got them on alert, on heightened alert, and thinking, well, what's really happening here? So, like it's that fear, factor going inside of them. And so, our ability to recognize what's happening when we're communicating. So you do have to get really good with that emotional intelligence side of communication, right? So understanding how your body language and your tone of voice and your eye contact and even down to the words that you're using, that they're strength-based language, and all of that matters in communication. All of that matters in communication with human beings in general, in any relationship. But it is most important for creating safe space, because again, living with this disease is scary. And so, creating more safe space so that, that people living with dementia don't feel like they're just constantly pushed out of the loop, left out of the loop. Everyone's making decisions for them, and they have, no understanding of what's really happening anymore. I've had those conversations where they say that's what they're feeling, and they can express that verbally very clearly. So yeah, leaning on every communication tactic that you can pull out of your back pocket and learning more and continuing to get better at it, I think is key. And there's even a piece. I have to find it. I think I'll try and pull it out. I tried to tab it before here, but the nonverbal communication that we give off from just our energy, right? Like our spirit energy. Because you can walk in a room with someone who is frustrated, living with dementia. They're rummaging and they're looking for something that they have lost. And just the way you walk in the room with your own demeanor can really flip the energy of the room, and enable you to slowly soothe and calm the space, and slowly sort of de-escalate that situation. So it's not just communication like you would typically think, even your five senses communication, but it is, some of that energy that you're just giving up that is also communicating. And you can control that, and you can change it. You can use it as a tactic. You can use it as a tool. You're manipulating the environment with it for good reason.
So you kind of saying like, if we come in and we're really happy or we're really soothing or something like that, that would go far into just kind of changing what the approach is, what the energy is.
Yeah. Let's just use that use case example of someone is, in their bedroom, and they are going through the closet and they are digging for their purse because they've lost their purse. It's a really common thing that happens, right? Lose their purse. Looking everywhere for it. Someone stole it. That's the next thing we go to. Someone stole my purse, And, first of all, it is, oh my gosh, well, I hope nobody stole it, but let me help you look for it, right? It's not, no, nobody stole it. Like that immediately, makes them feel devalidated. So it's immediately when you see something negative happening in the room, first of all, enter slowly. Even if you can see that it's a negative situation, find a way to enter the room slowly, and enter with that, ground yourself in your own peace, and just try to inject and inflect that feeling of safety and calmness and peace into the room. And then because that's going to come out through whatever words happen to come out of your mouth then, as you start to then join the conversation and try to redirect, that energy is going to come through your tone of voice and how you're walking towards the person.
Yeah.
I don't know, did I get too circular there? I'm not sure.
No. And actually that really, it makes me think about when we're doing our Compass for the Caregiver program, we have the awareness wheel that we talk about. And it's almost like having to do something like that and assess before walking in the room. And so our awareness wheel, it's like, okay, what have I seen? What are my thoughts? What are my feelings? What do I want? out of the situation, and then what actions do I take? And so really looking at that and seeing like, okay, this is the story I'm telling myself, but is that really what's going on? And how can I approach this a little differently? And being able to go through that and give yourself that time before really engaging in a situation, or like stepping back and doing that, I think is probably even more important in a situation with somebody who has dementia, and you're trying not to react to the immediate.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think it's even more important to pause. Like, even when you see they need help and they're frustrated and they're destroying things, like, but what's another 5-10 seconds?
Mhm.
Unless they're hurting themselves or hurting someone else, like, what's another 10 seconds for you to pause and reflect on what you're seeing and comparing it to the story that just started telling yourself, and doing those things that you just said. Yeah,
Mhm.
that is a good tool in that program. Yeah.
Right. Um, what would you say to a caregiver who's, again, kind of at the beginning of this journey, and knowing that, okay, this is a long haul, this is going to go on for a while? When you were dealing with some of the caregivers, the families and things like that, was that something that um, you had a way to kind of help people frame that?
Yeah, I think my piece of advice is to keep bringing yourself back to the present, right? Because with a progressive diagnosis that worsens, such as Alzheimer's, which is a specific form of dementia, not all dementia is progressive, Alzheimer's definitely is. So, staying present in the moment where the capacity is the best way to continue, rewarding, enjoying, getting gratification out of that relationship. So although it's important to understand the disease, so that nothing really catches you off guard as you observe changes, that it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess this is just part of it. But it is, just bringing yourself back and saying, no, but this is good right here where we are. It's good what we have, and I'm going to enjoy what we have. And so finding moments to just actually set the thought about the disease and the diagnosis and the horrible symptoms that it has, just set it over here and just engage with your loved one right now, whatever they're doing. Like, I would have family members join our programs all the time. In supportive living environments, we do all kinds of daily programs, and arts and crafts and dance programs, and we'd go to museums and games, and we would take family members with us because it gave them an activity and an outlet to engage, um, just in the present moments and enjoy those moments. And so I think that that's an important thing for us to keep reminding ourselves in the early stages, because you could easily miss out on some of the great moments that are sitting there in front of you.
Oh, for sure. And again, we could kind of saying engaging in those different things. Like the cover of your book, even you said was done by somebody in the art program, and I know that in Calgary we do have the art program here as well. And talk a little bit about that, like some of the things, particularly as a recreation programmer, being able to work with the arts and work with different forms of expression with somebody who has dementia, and what things that were brought out by that.
Well, music and art uses different side of the brain, right? Those non-analytical sides of the brain, and those creative outlets are still really successful forms of communication. So for even people in mid to late stages of dementia who are really struggling to verbally communicate, can communicate a lot through painting or by dancing or by using those sensory forms of communication. And it's enjoyable for them too, right? I mean, it's fun. I mean, so many people would say, I don't know how to paint. I am not a painter. And I'd say, it doesn't matter. Let's just sit down and see what we can create. And it was phenomenal what they could create. I mean, the person who did that never painted a day in her life. And it's really great, beautiful stuff that she created. Um, and vibrant, right? Like, so, you can see the vibrancy in that photo, and that was her. Like, that was her personality. So it was just so fun. But yeah, the non-analytical sides of the brain are some of the last areas to go with Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's really attacks your executive functioning, in the early parts, and it just eats all that away. And so, what remains is, as that part of the brain dies, is these more creative, non-analytical types of, ways to engage and communicate. So, yeah, I've luckily, I'm an artist at heart, so I got to do that kind of work and really enjoy it. So it was, writing this book was a passion project because I got to share words, of wisdom that, I've been sharing for years, but it was also getting to highlight some of the really wonderful moments that I experienced through artistic outlets with my friends with dementia. Yeah.
Yeah, and music too. I mean, it's just so amazing. Like, I know my grandmother was a pianist, and at the end, there wasn't a lot that she could remember or participate in, but she could sit down at that piano and play perfectly.
Phenomenal, right? So this is what drew me into this line of work and working with people with dementia. So I was a music major. I'm a pianist and a vocalist, and I went to university for music performance. And I took a part-time job in like the local nursing home during university years. And immediately, they needed help with their locked ward of Alzheimer's and dementia patients at the time. And I, took my piano books, and I'd sit down and play, and they loved it. It made everyone happy, made the staff happy, everybody calmed down. It was a great tool, right? And there was one particular resident who really just walked up and down the hall, was very anxious. It was a lady. And she couldn't communicate well verbally. I don't remember if I put the story in the book or not. I don't, but anyway, she couldn't verbalize very well any longer. I mean, she could get some words out, and she could make some sense sometimes, but not really. And she wandered a lot, and I think that frustrated her that she couldn't communicate, and so she was really anxious. And so that was a form of how she got that anxiety out of her body. Well, I sat down at the piano and was playing a song that she happened to know, and she came and sat down next to me, put her arm like around me when she like was very standoffish typically, and just sat there and sang the whole song. And that was early days experience for me, and it really blew me away. And I thought, what is happening for this woman that she can't talk, and she's agitated and angry, but yet music soothes her, calms her down, and she suddenly can talk. She could suddenly speak. Like, well, what the heck's happening? And so that really just personally then dove me into I read everything I could read about the scientific research happening behind the diagnosis, and have done that for years. I've cut out clippings from newspapers for years and have kept them. And because it is really interesting, they're just locked behind a wall in their brain. That's it.
Yeah, and suddenly there's this doorway that's
Yeah.
opening. So yes, no, that's great. I want to make sure we leave enough time, because I think there's probably quite a few questions, but knowing again that you wrote this book 11 years ago and everything that you've experienced since then, is there anything that you would kind of change about it, or add, or say, okay, this is more important, or this research has changed here?
Yeah. I didn't get into talking about research and with this book, because I really wanted this to be more about how you can enjoy your time with your loved one, right? But that's not to negate how important research is on this disease. And so I don't know if certainly wouldn't change anything, and I wouldn't add it to make it suddenly this like book that is full of all the research either. But I think there is space for promoting participation in research where appropriate, where you can, right? Because there, this is just a swelling, of common diagnosis for this disease, and much of it just is just stats of population of, because we just have this curve of aging that is occurring. And so a lot of it is that, but I do think a lot of it, they are discovering has correlation to other diseases, that certainly, your risk factors, are in genetic side of things. So they've discovered so many additional things that then impact this disease and the diagnosis of it. And so I would say stay alert, stay aware, don't just ignore that side that's also occurring in the background. Not that you can believe everything you read, but like I think it's just important to stay in the know where you have the capacity to do that. Like it's not like everybody has time to sit and read scientific papers, but find reputable sources that you can touch base on every so often. Or when you see an article that pops up related to the diagnosis, read it. Be like, this sounds a little wonky, or this sounds a little interesting. Maybe I'll dig more into this. Who wrote this? Where is this coming from? So yeah, I think that's what I would say to that. I mean, nothing that's in this book is rocket science, and it is such practical tips and tools that like I think it covers a lot of the practicalities of having a happy, successful relationship. I don't know, there's all different types of things you could say, but I don't know what I would add.
Yeah, no, and it is. I think that looking at this, it is timeless, because the things are okay. These are practical tips, and for any of you who don't have the book or haven't seen it yet, I will read out what the contents of chapters are. So there's chapter 1 is being vulnerable. Chapter 2, understanding the disease. Chapter 3, inclusion therapy. Chapter 4, know their needs. 5, communicate effectively. 6, offer acceptance. 7 is renew a sense of control. 8, don't argue. 9, redirection and distraction. Number 10, laughing it off. Number 11, remaining calm. 12, be consistent. 13, using therapeutic outlets. And 14 is give love. And yeah, I mean, again, those are all, yeah, no matter when you're reading this, or I mean, not just with dementia, but with so many other things too, as a caregiver, those are the areas that you need to look at, and those are such effective things. And I suppose, like, looking at 14, give love, I think it's also important. Makes me think of self-compassion as well, and making sure that you're giving that to yourself, because this is a hard journey.
Yeah, for some people it's a really long journey, yeah, so self-compassion is important, and as you're walking through this journey with your loved one, you're not always going to have the best response. You're going to react in ways you wish you would not have. You'll make decisions that you wish you would have done different, and with that you have to give yourself grace and just say, bam, done. Can't change it. I'm not going to think about it and obsess over it. I'm just going to move forward, right? Like that is grace, acceptance, and moving forward with total love and acceptance of yourself in that, right? It's the chapter on redirection and using tools of redirection and distraction becomes a really helpful technique. Especially in middle stages, when there's still a lot of like physical mobility left, and that the cognition is really starting to, the executive functioning is really getting affected. And so you learn these little redirective techniques where you're not arguing. Do not go in and argue. I used to tell staff all the time when they would be going in to help, assist someone to get dressed, and if you walk in the room and they're mad at you and they're telling you, where's my shirt? You took it. You say, oh my gosh, I didn't mean to take it. Let me go look for it. I'll be right back. Leave the room, get out of the way for a minute, try again in 5 minutes, and when you come back, say, oh, I went to look for that shirt. I couldn't find it, let me see if we can just find something different for now, like you're redirecting, through conversation in that example, but like you can also physically redirect, like when we would have residents in later stages who obviously would be at risk if they were leaving the building. So you have certain alarms on exit doors, right? And you see them going towards that door, you know what they're wanting, right? And it's, it's not get away from that door, stop, it's just the common old way of engaging with people living with that diagnosis. But it is going up and say, oh, hey, Francis, I've been looking for you. There you are. Hey, was going to see if you wanted to come have a cup of tea, or, they're getting ready to serve ice cream, in the community room. Let's go grab some, and, I'm speaking in a communal setting there, but you can do the same thing at home. You walk in home and you see your loved one that's like, going at it over here, angry about something, you can quickly think about it for a minute and be like, oh, hey, I missed you today. Let me pour us a cup of tea. Those ability to redirect, because also people living with dementia and Alzheimer's get very hyper focused on something, right? That's our brain's attempt to calm itself down. Like, frankly, like when your brain is stressed out and going in an anxiety loop, and I'm learning more about this with a daughter with ADHD, which I don't experience myself. So I'm learning a lot in that space. When your brain's going over here and distracted by all these things, and you get hyper focused on something because that's your brain's solution for trying to rein it in, right? So that's what's happening for someone living with dementia too, when they're getting hyper focused on this particular issue and this particular challenge for them. And so just acknowledging the challenge, offering to help, and then coming up with a creative solution to the challenge. So another example I will share is, like you're I would go sit with my grandpa sometimes. My grandma kept my grandfather at home for many years living with dementia, and she would get out of the house, go for a break, and he'd say, well, I need to go to the hardware store. So let's go get in the car and go to the hardware store. And I'd say, oh, well, grandma took the car, so we can't go, and he'd say, oh, darn it, I that's you find these ways to just come up with little white lies that work, and you should never feel guilty about that, because if you're telling a little white lie that's making someone living with a cognitive challenged brain because of a disease they can't control, well, that's helping them. You're not hurting them, you're helping them, right? We had another person at one of the buildings that I worked in who was very, very high functioning, like, like, and he would say often, like, he'd have the key, his family let him keep the keys to his car because it's sort of like a soothing tool, right? You're so used to having something in your hand or in your pocket for 50 years. So he had the keys to his real physical car. And so sometimes he'd be like, I'm gonna go hop in the car and go to the drugstore. And we would just say, oh, hey, John, your son had to take the car to to get his oil changed. So it's not here right now,
Yeah.
just little ways like that for redirecting and distracting elsewhere. Yeah, I don't think you even asked me about that. I'm not sure how I got down that path, but I do think it's important that, we think about those things and talk about creative ways to
Yes.
avoid arguments, right? Creative ways to help diffuse conflict, or what could be conflict, or recognize when you see a situation that's about to blow up, like how can you redirect that energy elsewhere?
Yeah. Redirecting that, and then also redirecting it based on where your memory might be at that time. And so thinking, okay, if they think it's 1980, what would I say that would fit into that? So it's like, okay, it is soothing. This is something that's okay. This is where they are. So let's talk about where they are and put it into that context. Yeah. Right. I think we have a lot of questions coming up. So Sandra, I don't know if you want to hop back on here and maybe share some of the questions. There she is.
I've been trying to answer some, as we've been going through, but yeah, we've been having a great conversation on the side here, and that it's been making your conversation even more rich. It's hard. I wish you could all be, taking it all in. But I think one of the first questions here from Carol is that balance. She shared a story about her mother, who was early on set Alzheimer's, and then also diagnosed with a medical condition, and actually something like cancer, like she's sharing it. So she had to remind, like, where are we going? What's wrong with me again? Like, what's some of the ways that we can do in dealing with that? Like, she really struggled with that. I wish someone, she says, had suggested to me other options for her. Do we agree we need to consider this when choosing a path for treatment for those with dementia? So, wanted to have that as part of the conversation.
Absolutely. I think when you're living with someone with dementia who is then their short-term memory is highly affected already. That's a great example, Carol. Thank you for sharing. I think you do have to reassess your treatment options differently. And hopefully get a good doctor that's willing to like sort of talk through that with you to be like, okay, well, this is our traditional recommendation. But okay, maybe is there a different type of treatment? Like even if it's still you want to still try chemo or radiation, like, but is there a different form that doesn't require as frequent trips?
Mhm.
So yes, I think you definitely should then reflect on what all the options are and what may be the number one recommendation from a physician for someone not living with that diagnosis versus, well, but what in this use case, what's the better choice? What's number two or number three option that actually becomes number one option because of this other diagnosis, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I know we see that a lot too, just with knowing that, okay, if my loved one needs to go into the hospital, it's an unfamiliar environment. Like there's going to be things going on they don't know. And again, that fear part of it. Is it worth the level of fear? Is it worth what's going to be going on
Mhm.
for them not understanding to go through that treatment?
100%.
And
I
yeah,
really
making those
reevaluate,
decisions.
before you just take someone living with dementia and Alzheimer's to the hospital to make sure it's really necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Sure.
thank you for that insight. I think that was probably really helpful. Um, I'm trying to read as I'm uh, trying to read the comments on what you just said too. And excellent. One of our next questions is, first of all, a lot of thank yous on here. Really, a lot of people saying thank you. This is a great, I really looking forward to seeing your hearing, seeing your perspective and to diving into some of the examples that you have. Most people haven't read the book yet. Looking forward to it. I did see it's on Amazon, but is there anywhere else that they can find it?
I have hard copies, right?
Okay.
Well, for instance, somebody is doing a draw tonight. Somebody's getting a copy of this book.
Yeah.
But yes, it is published just through the Amazon platform to make it super easy for people to purchase. But I also purchase in bulk and redistribute to friends, family, and request as needed. So you're welcome to contact me. That's fine as well. If sometimes people, I don't know why, but sometimes there is a challenge, okay, sometimes getting it from Amazon. So if you
Yeah.
have a challenge, let me know, let us know. Yeah.
Excellent. So that was
Yeah.
one main question.
Yeah.
Another
My
one
brother
was
just texted me yesterday and be like, hey, when you come home, can you bring 2 copies of your book or can I buy it on Amazon? But yes, you can buy it on Amazon, but
Well, and you have an ebook too.
it
yes.
is an ebook form too. Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
So another question is, how did you manage to take time for self-care? What kind of
Mhm.
supports did you have in the beginning of your journey?
Mhm.
That's a
Well,
hard
first you
question.
don't, you tank.
Yes.
That's just what happens. Okay. I didn't.
Mhm.
Um, Yeah, and then I did just have to release guilt, which I think I saw a comment about guilt somewhere in
Yeah.
the chat there. Just had to release the guilt and say, no, I need this, so I'm going to do this, whatever this is. Fill in the blank. We know what we need to do for self-care. I
Mhm.
mean, we do.
Yeah.
Whether that means that we need to, go see a friend. We need to get out of the house alone. We need to get up and do yoga. That's a big thing for me. Do I do it every morning? No. Do I know I need it? Do I know it's a good form of self-care? Yes. Right. So we know what we need to do. So I think the flip side of that question is what helps you then do what you know you need to do, right? So Sometimes it is lessening expectations on yourself, so not being so hard on yourself when you don't get up out of bed and do yoga like you should be. Like sometimes it's that. You're like, well, that's okay. It's all right. I'm gonna lay here today. Sometimes it is truly just releasing that guilt, and saying, recognizing that, I'm taking time for myself, it's taking time away from this person, but I need that, right? Like, I sing in a palliative care choir, and they get together every week. We practice, and then we sing in hospice rooms. And I get so busy in life, and I get through phases where I just don't go for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then I go, and it is so fulfilling.
Yeah.
I think, oh my God, I've got to make time for this, right? Like no matter what. And so I've just really been making a point to make time for it more, and I'll take my kids if I have to take my kids, and they'll sit in a corner and play on their iPads, and that's fine, right? Like, so I think it's getting creative about what are the barriers, what's keeping you from doing that. And some of it's negative self-talk. So kick that to the curb, like just get it to the curb. Be more self-grace and creative options for accomplishing and getting that fill in the blank, whatever it is.
It's great. I think it's interesting. I'm seeing some of the comments come here where they're kind of supporting what you're saying. Like maybe I can't have a lot of time, but making sure I pick something I really truly enjoy. It gets quality time rather than quantity. That was
Yeah,
really,
absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And when
And
you're struggling with that balance, we give so much on a daily basis, and we're not sure how to step back and recharge for ourselves and our loved ones. So you're giving that advice. Find something and something that means something to you, and try to make time.
yeah,
Yeah.
another big element in that too, though, is as caregivers, so many of us are perfectionists. We need to
Mm.
do it all. We need to
Yeah.
be the person who's controlling it all. We need to, we're the one who can do it the best. And
Mhm.
letting that go and knowing that, okay, it's okay if this isn't done the way I would have done it, if I can take that break and step back. If I come back and the dishes are put away in a weird location, it's like, okay, I will just slowly put them back where they're supposed to be, or I'll use them from there. So again, just again, letting go. And I know for me, that was a huge, huge thing, was learning to just be like, you know what? It's okay if this is a mess today.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And giving
And then
yourself
that
that
a
permission.
lot of yeah, and a lot of comments on that about the guilt can be huge,
Mhm.
right? We love so hard. We want everything to be done right. And when it's done right, we feel guilty. But
Yeah.
d- what's right? What's that level, right? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's-
But and Gail and Linda are both saying here that um they agree that that guilt can be really huge, and love that they love so hard, but they're fortunate to have caregiver support. So they can
Mhm.
mention that well in there as well. Um,
I noticed a question here from Beth that is asking, is it helpful to bring up old memories and stories from their
yeah,
past?
yeah,
I find some stories she remembers and thinks about them fondly, but should I encourage? Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes, and more yes, yes. Because when you're engaging in a place where they can engage in, like it also makes them feel. There's a chapter in this book about renewing a sense of control, finding opportunities for them to be in control of the
yeah,
conversation or in control of the decision is actually like not just helpful, but it helps their brain, right? Like it's using their brain. So yes, absolutely bring up old memories and talk about things that they can then guide, control the conversation. Yeah.
Mhm.
And talk about the same thing every day. That's fine. It
Yeah.
gets old, but that's okay.
Yeah. And I even use that as like, I had to take my mother-in-law to the emergency room one day. And I grabbed a photo album on the way out the door. So for the 3 hours that we were sitting there, we would go through the photo album. And that just kept her calm. It kept her talking about these old memories. And we went through it over and over again.
yeah,
And but it was, yeah, it kept her in this happy place as opposed to sitting in the ER all scared, not knowing why she's there, not knowing what's going on. And yeah, those memories, yeah, they really did. I picked one that I knew was a good trip, and they lifted her up, and she got to describe each one. And yeah, yeah. So I've definitely seen that working.
we have a question here too about moving. like what if someone with dementia has to move? Like how do you help someone prepare for something like that? I mean, I think some of us were probably dealing with that during lockdown, moving people, but what were some of your suggestions on that?
Well, it depends on the use case, but when you're just in general, Karen can give advice on this too. She just went through this last year. But in general, the best case is to understand what's the most important objects of your loved one. I mean, the best case is to get them out of the way where they're happy, not whether then they're angry that they're not apart. Like find a way to be like, well, let us do this for you, mom. Like let us get it packed up. I don't want you to worry about it. I will pack everything you're asking for, So find out what are the most important things. And then, get them in a happy spot, for a day or two, and then get everything unpacked and resettled in the new space before you bring them to it. And
Mm.
try and set it up with the same furniture. Like so often, we think we gotta move or downsize, we gotta get rid of everything and get new. No, I highly recommend keeping anything familiar when you can, and setting it up in really similar ways and making it look really comfortable and cozy before you bring them to their new space.
Yeah.
I also always recommended in my own family, I went through this with discussions with family in the sense of when you know you're living with dementia or progressive dementia or Alzheimer's, and so you're going to have to downsize eventually, like it's just part of reality. And maybe it's not for some because some live multi-generation, it's okay, that's all right. But I'm saying if you know that the downsizing, the moving is required for your future because of this diagnosis, I recommend making that decision far sooner than later. Because if you move when the brain has a higher ability to relate and adjust, like it has more coping skills for adjusting, it's going to be better. It's going to be more successful. It's not going to be as scary. It's not going to be as much conflict. And a compromised brain has a higher chance of getting familiar with a new space, the more capacity it has. Like it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, my mother is living with early onset, and this is new-ish, and they're still living. My parents are still living at home alone and on a single story, mind you, but a house that they've lived in for 25 years that is full of tons of stuff. And I've had this conversation several times because it's not that they haven't considered downsizing now, while there's still plenty of time to get really comfortable and familiar in a new space, but it's a very personalized decision and there's no judgment either way. But I do think if you plan to move and you're going to, the sooner you do it, the better.
Some good advice, that's for sure.
Well, and John was saying I just went through this year and a half ago or whatever, but on top of it, my father-in-law passed away, which was why we had to move my mother-in-law. And that's just added on top of everything. Like they were fine as a unit together, and like he had physical, she had memory issues, but they were a whole. And now all of a sudden, all of that had to change and move into a smaller space. So again, yeah, we making sure that like her favorite lamps were there. She kept her bed. She kept her favorite pictures on the wall, different things like that. But yeah, it completely different. She went from being in a house to being in an apartment. Completely different, having to go downstairs for meals, all of these types of things that were so, so different. And I think just also giving them that grace while it's going on and just checking in, keeping sort of saying, yeah, it's different. And no, this is yours. This is still here. Like the important things are still right here. All the things that you really want, they're right here. And that's what I've been finding living through it for the last little while.
Another question that we have is the correcting. Like I even know I can relate. I know that was with my grandmother had vascular dementia, and the siblings argued about it. Like my mom would say, "Oh, don't worry about, yeah, yeah, yeah." Like she would just, if she called her Marianne, she just said, "Yeah, thanks, mom." Like she didn't ever correct her and say, "No, I'm Jessie." Like she just never corrected her. Like she just kind of went with it. Well, my other two aunts got really stressful about it. Like they always wanted to correct her. No, grandpa's passed. No, that we don't have that car anymore. And I'm just wondering what's some of your advice behind um, when is it important to, just go along with them or so forth.
It's always important to go along for them.
Yeah,
It's
good.
never
Yeah.
important to correct them unless
Yeah.
unless it's causing pain to someone.
Hmm.
Is it causing pain? Like, is someone about to be hurt?
Yeah.
If not, then always agree.
Just always agree. Yeah.
Well, and especially if somebody has passed, you have to remember if you're telling them somebody has passed, it's like hearing it for the first time every time you say it.
Hmm.
And so that grief and everything that's going on, it's reoccurring. So if you need to say they're not here, they've gone, they're out somewhere, they're doing something that they would normally do, you can just say that's where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, flip it. Does anyone like to be told they're wrong? Do you like to be told you're wrong?
No.
It's a
Yeah.
horrible feeling.
Yeah.
So imagine being told you're wrong all the time while also being frustrated at yourself for not remembering things.
Mhm.
It's a crappy way to live.
Yeah.
I actually have another comment here about the moving. I think that what if you are having trouble convincing the person to move?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Common.
We deal with that a lot.
Yeah, they don't want to
Um,
move. Yeah.
Karen, that's a good question for you because you had to work on that, didn't you? As a process, wasn't it?
yeah, it was a process, and plus that is such a common caregiver question for us as well. And yeah, it honestly, it's situational, and unfortunately, sometimes it is waiting until something you hope it's not really major, but it's waiting till something happens and then using that as your reasoning.
Yeah.
Yeah, like if there was a fall or like
It's true.
my
Yeah.
mother-in-law, unfortunately, she realized she couldn't do things around the house. Like, so she just kept getting frustrated by certain things. Um, and yeah, so it's like, okay, I think it's time that we go somewhere that's a little easier. And I mean, we made the decision, and after the decision was made, yes, she kept saying, "Oh, I shouldn't have done this. I need to go back to my place." All of these kind of things, but it was done by then, and we could work with it.
Yeah.
So I am looking at the time here. We have about 5 more minutes. Um, so Sandra, I don't know if there's anything else.
Well, there's another good question here. I think we have time for it, and then maybe we can do our shutdowns. One is it's not what winning, like there just a lot of comments about this love your person-centered approach that we're just, doing what's best for the person.
Mhm.
But they say, I feel like it's like reestablishing the newness of the relationship. Was this difficult for you, and what challenges did you experience learning about the disease with a family member? Is it different working with a person with dementia versus finding out your loved one has some other kind of disease? Is the question.
Is it different if your loved one has cancer versus if they have dementia?
Yeah.
Or is it asking, is it different working with someone with dementia versus working with a family member with dementia? Might need
It's
some clarification there.
Yeah, it is different working with persons with dementia versus finding out, um, sorry, about one of your loved ones is diagnosed with the disease.
Yeah, well, so I'm at the beginning stages of this journey with my mother.
Mhm.
I always knew that it was probably a pretty high risk in our life. Her father passed, her aunt passed. And not that we don't have the one gene of it, but that doesn't mean, I mean, they're finding out there's all kinds of additional genes now that are a risk for that, right? So I need to go back and redo my own genetics. But it is very different dealing with a loved one versus caring for someone. I'm so glad that I had so many years to care for people living with dementia and understand how to relate to them and understand how to communicate with them and understand how to hold space for them and
Yeah.
understand how to help family members join and create space for that relationship to flourish. because I learned how to do all of that, which is hugely important. I knew I would need those skills when it would hit my personal life, and it is still so very different when it hits home. It is just different. Now, my mom's not far enough along in the process for me to really start enacting some of those other tools, but it is way like the, you know, the don't argue and the don't, you know, the don't correct, like super super easy, like to already be, you know, working on. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I answered that question appropriately.
No, I think that's a great answer. I
Yeah.
do have some questions about how do we find some support if we need it. So I'm just putting in the chat here.
Caregivers
You can
Alberta.
get a hold of us because we can reach out to a coach or, you know, we want to be there for you. So I'm just putting
And
it in there. That's why I was a little bit distracted on the screen.
that's okay. And just
get that information in there because people
and for anybody who's not familiar with Caregivers Alberta and our coaching program and all of those things, one thing is everybody on our support services team, actually the majority of the people on in our organization, but the support service team, we are all caregivers as well. So, and there is a number of us that have a lot of experience with dementia. And so definitely reach out. We're happy to talk. And those are free of charge for the caregivers. So again, if you're not sure, reach out, have a chat with us.
The last thing I'll say before we close, and from personal experience, my mother's in early stages, be the loudest advocate you can be for your loved one.
Yeah.
I don't care how scary it seems to speak up to a doctor, or kindly, respectfully. I'm not saying to you, but like when you have a thought and think, well, but maybe we could try this, or I read about this medication, or what about this therapy? Bring it up and request it. Don't just ask what they think about it. If you want to try it, say, can we try this? Will you write me a prescription for this? Can we do this therapy? So that, please be the advocate for your loved one, because it can make a huge difference in their quality of life. And I'm living that right now. So
yeah. Oh, excellent. We have a lot of thank yous here.
And the questions that are in there, I mean, definitely if there's questions we didn't answer that are connected to email, we can follow up for sure, and answer those questions. So.
Well, we really appreciate you all coming out today. When you do, please do. I did put the link to our website on there as well, so you can check out our website. And from the website, you can access our Eventbrite as well and look at the upcoming events that are coming. We also have our conversation groups, which will I think they're kind of winding down, but then we'll start again right up as for May and June. And when you do leave, you will probably be asked to do a little survey. So if you can do that, that would be great. We really appreciate that. All the information you give us is helpful. And I will send a follow-up email in a few days with the recording and any answers to the questions that might have been missed. So thank you so much. And I hope you guys have an excellent evening. And thank you, Joanne. I'm Donna. I just really enjoyed hearing about your book and I can't wait to read it myself. I'm sorry I haven't read it yet.
Thanks for having me. Everybody have a great evening.
Thanks so much.